Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Washing Dishes. Today we're going to make something near and dear to my heart, pickles. Specifically, we're going to make some really wonderful pickled onions with serrano, lime, and cilantro. We're going to use some cider vinegar to make those. We're going to put them in jars. They're not going to be completely preserved like canned shelf stable. They're going to be fridge pickles. But let's get started on those, and I'll go through some of the things we're going to need for them. For our pickled onions, like I said, we're going to need several ingredients. The cilantro, serranos, and lime, of course. And then the onions themselves. You always want some garlic in pickles. And then we're going to add some whole cumin, which I have here, as well as my own personal blend of pickling spices. This is a mixture of cloves, coriander, mustard, black pepper, ginger, and a few other things. Commercial pickling spice blends are totally fine place to start. It's where I got started. Once you kind of have an idea of what you like, you can start making your own. The other thing we're going to need is some mason jars. These are quart mason jars, and the first thing we're going to do to start our pickling is set up the jars. The first thing we're going to do is add some garlic. For jars this size, I generally do like 6 to 8 cloves of garlic into the jar. And then some of these are kind of small, so I'll add a few more just in case. For the serrano, we're going to break these up. I'm going to do half in big chunks into this jar. And a whole one, almost a whole one, into this jar. This other half we'll reserve for our pickling liquid. This one is going to have no additional spice. For our limes, you're going to want to wash them, and then I'm going to use a regular just vegetable peeler to peel a few pieces of zest from each of them. And we're just going to drop a piece or two of that into the jar. These will get juiced later, and that juice will become part of the pickling liquid. I'm also going to add a few whole cumin seeds to each jar. Just a little pinch. These aren't going to add a lot of flavor, but they look pretty and it kind of notes that they're there. And now, again, mostly because we want it to look pretty, we're going to add some cilantro. I'm just going to trim off the fluffy leaves, and we'll hold this back for the pickling liquid. And then we'll just drop a few of these leaves into each jar. There we go. Now I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way, and then we'll chop up the onions. Well, there's nothing to it but to do it. We've got a lot of onions to chop, and I'm going to get started. I'll show you the first cut. It's called a lyonnaise cut. You kind of nip the tip, split it in half, and then because we want these to fall apart, we're going to take the stem end off, or the root end off, which makes them easy to peel. And then we're going to come in at an angle like this and cut sticks of our onions, angling our knife as we go. And when you get to here, you can just turn it over and make one more or two more cuts as needed. I'll run that again at an angle, and we're coming in, and as we continue through, we're shifting the angle of our knife to match the angle of the part of the onion we're cutting. And then again, when we get here, we just tip it over. And this one's going to need 2. 1. 2. And then we just pile these into the jars as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and speed through that, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. Well, it turned out I only had enough onions for 2, but that works out just fine. So, next we need to talk ratios, and then we'll head over to the stove. Now that I've gathered the various liquids that we're going to be using for these pickles, let's talk about ratios. So these are each 32-ounce jars. I've added onions to them, and that's going to take up about 16 ounces of the space in the jar. I want to fill the other 16 ounces with the pickling liquid, or pickle brine. I'm going to use a mixture of lime juice, cider vinegar, plain old white distilled vinegar, and some water to get us to that amount. I generally recommend starting with half water and half vinegar, or I should say, starting with an equal amount of water and vinegar in your pickle brine, especially if you're going to be doing a hot brine method like we are today. Which means that if we want 16 ounces of liquid for each of these jars, that's 32 ounces. If we go half water, half vinegar, we want a total of 16 ounces of sour. And that's going to be a mixture of these 3 things. First things first, let's see how much lime juice we're going to get. It should be about, I'm expecting it to be about somewhere between a quarter and a third of a cup. Alright, as expected, that's around a quarter of a cup, so about 2 ounces. I'm going to add to that enough cider vinegar to bring it up to I'm going to want about 2 ounces of this. So I'm going to add enough of this to bring it up to 6 ounces. Brand new bottle of vinegar, because I finished my last one. Alright, so that's 8 ounces. That's how much we would use for one of these jars. Since I've already added the full amount of lime juice, we're going to bring it up the rest of the way to 2 cups. And we're maintaining the same ratio. 6 ounces of flavored vinegar to 2 ounces of just kind of distilled plain vinegar. And now that we've got the acidity, it's time to add the salt. I'm going to add the salt right to this just because it's convenient. And for this many pickles, I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. If you're going by weight, you're looking for about total about 40 grams. And that'll make it plenty salty, I promise. We've also got our cumin. We're going to add about a teaspoon of cumin. And a tablespoon of our pickling spice blend. Normally I would combine these in the pot, but the jar is clear and the pot isn't. Make sure we get a bay leaf in there. Very traditional. Not sure it does a lot, but why not? Anyway, so I'm going to get this in the pot and get it heated up, and I will see you in just a moment. With everything in the pot, we're just going to go ahead and let that go until it comes to a rolling boil. We're going to let it stay at a rolling boil for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to strain it and add it to our jars. Now that we've let our pickling brine boil for about 5 minutes, we're going to strain out some of the solids and get it over to the board to finish straining it and get it into the jars. Next to me, I have the most sinus-clearing mixture known to humanity, pickle brine. Whoo boy! So, we want to get about half of the pickle brine into each of these jars. I've also got some water just off the boil, similar to the brine, just in case we boiled off too much of the water that we put into the pickle brine. Woo! So, being careful not to burn ourselves, we're going to add about half of this brine. This is a pickling funnel, and I've just got a fine mesh strainer. Oh, I'm dripping a little, but it's not the end of the world. I have towels for that. And as expected, we did come up just a wee bit short on the brine, so we're going to add some hot water to back that up. And you want to come just under the neck, and then we're going to seal these up. Give them a little wipe. These jars are quite hot. I tend to handle them by the rings for now. And with these jars sealed, what we're going to want to do is let them sit out on our bench until they come to about room temperature. Then we'll pop them into the fridge, let them sit overnight, and tomorrow morning we will have some really, really delicious pickled onions. These will keep in the fridge for anywhere from 1 to 5 months, 1 to 4 months, just depending on how often you go into them and where in the fridge they are. Generally, I would try to eat them, if they'll last that long, within the first about 6 weeks. After that, they tend to get kind of soft and the flavor just isn't as bright and beautiful. These are wonderful as a snack, great on tacos and really any kind of sandwich-like preparation. Tacos, hot dogs, sandwiches, any of that kind of stuff. They're really lovely as a garnish, just infinite uses like most pickles. So I hope you'll give these a shot. I hope you enjoy them when you do. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your time zone.